Okay, Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, nor stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. Psalm 1. It's the first psalm. That's an obvious one. But it's also an introduction and a summary of everything that follows. So you can relate all the psalms back to this. This is say someone's doing preaching a message or doing a sermon, and they have their opening statement, their opening remarks, and it gives you an idea of what's going to follow in the message that moves from it. Psalm 1 is like that. It's an introduction to the Psalms. And in a way, if you want to understand the Psalms, you understand Psalm 1. When you understand Psalm 1, everything else starts to make sense. It's one of those Psalms that's easy to read. And it's a Hebrew-style psalm. So the Hebrew Psalms, it wasn't rhyme and rhythm. So we do a poem, we do a song, and you want the end to rhyme, don't you? And if you're British and you read a poem and the end doesn't rhyme, he's missed something, hasn't he? Or the beginnings don't rhyme. But in Hebrew, it's not the sound that they're interested in, it's the theme. And so if you read the Psalms, what you find is they cluster together ideas. It's how the thing is structured. Now, Psalm 1, in the version I have in front of me, the text I have in front of me, is very badly broken up. The text isn't well broken up. Because it actually breaks into really four parts. The first one is, well, there's an opening statement, blessed is the one. There's a description of the walk of the wicked, the description of the walk of the righteous. There's the results of walking righteously, and then there's the results of walking wickedly. And then there's a final concluding statement that says God watches over all of this. So it follows a pattern. A description of the wicked, a description of the righteous, a description of the consequences of righteous living, a description of the consequences of the wicked living, and then at each end is God in control. It's intriguing. It's often, the Psalms are often like that. Sometimes they will do statement, consequence, statement, consequence. Sometimes they'll do statement, statement, consequence, and so there are patterns. So as you read the Psalms, you're not looking for poetry so much. You're really looking for the ideas and how they put the ideas together. Now, there are exceptions to that, because there are some Psalms that begin with the first letter of the alphabet, and each line is the next letter of the alphabet. Psalm 119 is by far the most famous. That's completely lost on us, but just Psalm 1. So looking at Psalm 1, the first introductory statement, blessed is the one. So that's the first introductory, that's the introductory statement. The question is this a description or is this a prescription? Okay. So it's like the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, blessed is, and then lays out, is that a description or is that a prescription? There's a difference, isn't there? You know? And we need to think about it kind of carefully. Is the person blessed because of something that's happened to them? Or is a person blessed as a response to what they're doing? That leads us to the question, what does blessed mean? It means blessed by God. If you say that blessed is a description of a life that God is involved in, so if you say, I'm blessed because God in his mercy showed me grace, came to me, gave me new life, and this is the life I'm living. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, well, I fulfilled all the laws, then I should be blessed. So one is a description and one is a prescription. I would suggest we have to avoid the prescription and look really at a description of a life that God is at work in. Otherwise, we're not saved by God's mercy, we're saved by our own works. Yeah? And you can see that kind of worked out in Psalm 1. Now, it's not without its issues, and it's not without its issues, but I'm going to argue that blessed is the one is a description of someone in whose life God is working. Yeah? So that's how I'm going to approach this. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, for instance, when Jesus, intriguingly, when he does his longest recorded sermon and has the Beatitudes, blessed is, I would argue again that that's a description of a life that God is at work in, rather than a prescription of how to please God and get into God's book and therefore be saved. It's God's mercy to us, not me trying to earn my salvation. And I'm going to argue that that's true also of Psalm and that whole theme of what it means to be blessed by God. The first statement is the counsel of the ungodly, or the company of the ungodly. Blessed is the one. And it's interesting that the psalmist is not afraid to start with the negative. We tend to be afraid to start with negatives, don't we? And the world says, you're so negative, you know. But it's a good way of clarifying truth by pointing out the negative. And so he starts with, blessed is the one, and then he describes that person in what they don't do. A blessed person is someone who doesn't do this, okay? Which is an intriguing way to describe someone. A blessed person is someone who doesn't do this. And then he describes what a blessed person doesn't do. Does not walk in step with the wicked, nor stand in the way that sinners take, nor sit in the company of mockers. And so those are, I'll break it down to three things there. They're simply broken down. Does not walk in step with the wicked, stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. What does that mean? Okay, a blessed person doesn't walk in step with the wicked. What do you think that means? What would you say that meant? Mixing? Yeah? Okay. So how do we... Okay, so narrow that down a little bit. Could I be righteous and go shopping in Aldi because it's full of sinners? Okay. Or, is that what he means?
Like following the wicked.
What? Go on. Supporting, following. Yeah. So it's more than just being with people who are not righteous. It's emulating them. Yeah? It's a discipleship word, isn't it? To walk, Jesus said, follow me. Walk in step with me. The Bible tells us to walk in step with the Spirit of God. So this is a description not of following Jesus, not of walking in step with the Spirit of God, but it's walking in step with wicked people. It doesn't mean being around them. It means being discipled by them. It's important we draw distinctions on this, because we can't live without touching, nor should we live without touching the lives of those who don't hold our views, of those. So we're not avoiding the presence of those people, but what we're avoiding doing is following their path. Yeah? Being discipled by them.
It says in the NIV, you're not walking the counsel of the wicked.
Yeah.
It's like listening to them and
Yeah.
being sidetracked.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Now, what does that tell us about fallen human beings? It tells us that fallen human beings, by character, walk in step with other fallen human beings. The psalmist is writing about something that we are inclined to do if we're not careful. You know, I wouldn't say our default position, but we can quickly begin to walk in step with the wicked. Yeah, if we're not guarding against it, if we're not thoughtful, if we're not careful. So you'd have someone says something like this, is it wrong to meet with, is it wrong to have a meal with people not Christians? Of course not, Jesus did that. Okay, so what if at that meal people start smoking? Well, the Bible doesn't say anything about smoking, and it's not good for your health. Well, we're told to take care of our bodies, but we're in a kind of a grayer area. Okay, so what happens if there's drinking? Well, in my view, the Bible doesn't speak about abstinence, though it may be wise. It doesn't say that a Christian can never drink. So, okay, well, then what happens if they start talking in a way that's improper? You know, that's rude and crude. Yeah. So you're having to make decisions as you're going along, aren't you? At what point am I starting to follow? At what point am I able to keep a clear conscience before God? And at what point? The area where that happens, where you move from being friends with someone to following someone, is often a very grey area, and often best seen in hindsight about 4 or 5 years later, you know, where you get a good idea. But it warns us to be careful who we follow. And then stand in the way that sinners take. What do you think that would mean? Stand. So there's progression here. Walk, stand, sit. There's a progression. So what do you think stand is?
To emulate their behaviour, to stand in the way of sinners means that you would emulate what a sinner is doing. You follow them in their actions, their language, their attitudes, perhaps.
Keep going. Keep going.
There you go.
No. Okay.
No.
If I say to you the word, where do you take your stand? Yeah. Who are you standing with? But use the word same word, but in a slightly different way. Who do you stand with? Who are you associated with? Who do you say, I belong to? I would argue that that's what he's thinking about. One is following someone. You can do so publicly. You can actually also do so privately and secretly. But this is beyond private and secret. This is a public I am standing with this person. So be careful who you stand with. Let's say someone is standing, we would use that a similar language. Someone is standing to be councillor. You go, okay, so who are they associating with? With what group, what parliamentary party, or who are they with? Who do they stand with? At the moment, there's a lot of people, well, they're not standing, they're gluing themselves to the road, aren't they? They're doing all sorts of very odd things. And they're taking a position and they're saying, this is what we associate with, this is what we think is vital, this is what we think is important. And so the psalmist is saying, who are you standing with? Yeah, not just who's leading you, but who are you standing with? Who do you associate with? Again, this is one of those areas where we have to be wise and thoughtful. And different people will make different decisions. So personally, I'm not a member of a political party, but I think we need Christians in political parties standing for Parliament. But what party they would choose as a Christian is a mystery to me. But if you say you're completely wrong, well, it's hard. But sometimes you'd say, yeah, at this point you have to be. Now, I know a man who was standing for one political party as a Christian, and he's no longer able to do so. He's stepped away. He can't stand with that party anymore because of its policies. And he's joined another political party, and you think, okay, so he decided that he couldn't stand. And that's just politics, but there are other groups and other ideas that we're called to stand with. Does that make sense? Now we're into progression, aren't we? So we're following them, we're standing with them, and now we're sitting with them. That's different. Standing with someone is different to sitting in their house. Sitting in their house, eating their food, and then speaking like they speak. And he describes it here, the psalmist, he says, or sit in the company of mockers, and or the council of mockers, or to join in the mocking. There's a progression, isn't there? You follow someone's ideas, you stand and you say, yes, I'm with them, and then you sit where they sit. Now, if your decision is to do so with wicked people, you'll end up sitting and mocking. And it's an indication of pride, isn't it? Mocking indicates self-confidence and pride and opinion and the disdaining of others who don't hold your view. And the psalmist says, just be really careful. Can you see the progression that the psalmist is
You become like them, then.
Sorry?
You become like the people in there.
You become like them.
You become one of them.
Yeah, you become one of them. Yeah, yeah.
Well, a Christian will stand up against it, wouldn't it?
We'll stop at well, that's where they take their stand somewhere else, don't they? Yeah, because they're following a different, they're discipled by a different guide, discipled by Christ today. And then we'd say primarily we stand with Christ, first and foremost. Yeah. So that's the counsel of the ungodly. Now, the counsel of the righteous is almost the same thing, but done in a different way. So the counsel of the righteous, the alternative to the counsel of the ungodly, begin with those who delight in the law of the Lord. So where's our discipleship? God and what he said. So we follow not the opinions of the world, but we follow the law of the Lord. That's where we're standing. That's who we're following. And delight in that. We delight in following the Lord. Brings up a lot of big questions, doesn't it, about how joyful Christians should be. And if following God's way makes you miserable, you've got to ask, what am I? If you don't delight in the things of God, you've really got to start asking some big questions about, what am I delighting in? If not the Lord and his word. And then the idea of meditating on his law day and night. To meditate is to ruminate on something, isn't it? All that comes to mind is in my lifetime watching the cows and they eat the food. I always think cows have a fantastic life because they eat something good, you see, and it goes into their first stomach, and then they bring it back and they get to chew it all again. And it sounds gross, but you could enjoy your meal twice, couldn't you? Weight Watchers would go out of business, wouldn't they? We only enjoy our meal once. But here's the word of God, and we're thinking about it, and we're reflecting on it, and we're ruminating upon it. And it's a different kind of counsel. It's a different belonging. Our discipleship is following the Lord and his direction. And it's almost the alternative. What annoys me or what frustrates me is that it's not in 3 parts. The second bit is only in 2 parts. The first bit is in 3 parts. And I'm not sure if that's the translation. I've not been able to work out if the translation creates a 3-part in the first description and 2-part in the second. I don't know. But you can see the same principle, isn't it? The delight in following God. That's who we walk in step with God. And meditate on his word while we stand with him and we sit in his presence. And he is our company day and night. And we meditate on his word and delight on him, in him. So this is different. This is a life lived in fellowship with God. Something that's delightful. Something that brings delight as we think through the great truths. Doesn't bring to us guilt and fear and pride, but it brings to us humility and thoughts of God's love for us, grace, mercy, and we delight in those things. When it says the law of the Lord, it doesn't mean Leviticus. It means the Old Testament is described as the law and the prophets. It just means all of God's word, you see. So we delight in all of God's word, is what the psalmist is saying.